Rev up your engines!
Well, the first quarter of this year, Ford is averaging losing $60,000 for every electric vehicle they sell. And they say they make sense. No, they lose dollars. They don't make sense, right? What's keeping Ford profitable is their big gasoline trucks and cars and their diesel trucks. Rather ironic, right? Ford makes most of its profit on F-150 line. Let me tell you, they're having a real problem with those Lightning electric pickup trucks. People aren't happy with them. They don't like them. They've been breaking down. They've had problems building them. Matter of fact, right now, they got another backlog of the electric Lightnings. And what's this one? They can't get the door handles, right? This is how stupid it is. I'm sure Henry Ford is rolling in his grave. Henry Ford believed in vertical integration. They'd build everything in their own factory, right? Ford doesn't even make the handles for their electric trucks, and the company that makes them isn't supplying them fast enough. Gee, maybe they should make them themselves. The whole point of a factory is it's a central location. If you keep getting parts from here and there just because it's cheaper, you're going to have a stranglehold whenever any of these companies screws up and doesn't build the part. It's just plain stupid, but of course, their bean counters told them, that's a good idea, baby. Buy it from somewhere else. You get it cheaper. We're going to make them cheaper. Yeah, and then you can't make it at all because those companies screw up. It only makes sense if you're building something to have vertical integration where you do it all in your own factory. Henry Ford figured that out. I'm sure he's rolling in his grave now. Gee, they're getting these parts from all over the place. They can't get them, or they're getting them and then they break and they don't work right. Look at GM. They've had those Corvettes and stuff. The valves and things are breaking out. Well, we get them from no other company. It's not our fault, right? Come on now. They need to make their own stuff and make it correctly. And if they don't, this is going to be fighting them in the rear end forever. Same thing with the batteries. They're going to buy batteries for electric cars where? Somewhere else, right? Then what happens when they can't get them? They can't build the car. Or, in the cases like the Chevy Bolt, the batteries all had to be recalled because they were burning and blowing up because they were getting them from South Korea. They weren't making them themselves. And then, wham. They can blame it on somebody else, but do you really care if you own a vehicle that doesn't work? You're going to blame the company you bought it from. Doesn't matter where they got the parts. You can say, well, you're the idiots that bought it from them and it blew up. It's your fault. Don't go blaming it on somebody else. Goose says, Fram says they have oil filters that last 25,000 miles. I change my oil every 7. Can I go for 3 oil changes, or is that a bad idea? It's a horrible idea. You change the oil in your car and you leave the filter. One, I don't believe that any filter is going to work for 25,000 miles. It's going to get clogged up. It isn't going to filter correctly, right? But regardless of that, you change the oil filter stays. You're not changing it, right? There's dirty oil in it, so you're not getting rid of that dirty oil. You'd have to take the oil filter off, drain it all out. That'd take a while because the oil's saturated in the paper. Dry and then put it back on. Don't do it. Just buy good oil filters. You change it every 7,000 miles. Just buy good oil filters and change them. Don't believe this BS about 25,000 mile oil changes. Some of these things, they just come up with the most nonsensical ideas. I got a lawnmower that I inherited with this house here in Rhode Island, right? And it's a Toro lawnmower. And on it says, you never need to change the oil. And I'm like, what a bunch of crap. The oil gets dirty. It's an internal combustion engine. Carbon builds up. You know, there's water vapor that is created when you burn gasoline in Earth's atmosphere. So you get some water in the oil and it doesn't work perfectly right. It's ridiculous. Of course, what do? I take the dipstick out. I drain it on its side. I drain the oil, put new oil in it every season. And it might last a long time. But they just say, oh, you never need to change it and this. Yeah, then the engine blows up, right? Don't do that. Just change the oil and filter at the same time. Frostall Project says, I have a PO138 trouble code. It comes back after I replace the oxygen sensor. I replaced the oxygen sensor 1 on bank 2. It keeps coming back with PO138. What should I do? Here's the problem. PO138 tells you that your oxygen sensor's stuck at high voltage, right? But it's a generic code. Yes, it's stuck at high voltage. There's many things that can do that. You tried the obvious fix. You changed the sensor and it didn't fix it. So as long as you used an OEM sensor, the original factory one, that's not your problem. There are literally dozens of things that can make it do that. You could have a problem with your fuel injection. You could have a problem with your ignition system. You could have a blowing head gasket. You could have a massive leak on the intake manifold. There's a billion things that can do that code. Now, on the other hand, it's a 2015 Ford, right? If it runs okay, you might just live with it. I had a guy the other day with a Toyota had the same thing, right? And he's been driving it 5 years that way, and it still runs perfectly fine. But if you want to figure it out, it gets complex now. I'd advise at least seeing a mechanic like me to put a scan tool on, record the live data on a road test, and then come back and analyze all that data and see what the heck is going wrong. Like I say, it could be a bunch of different things. Fuel injectors, ignition coils, head gasket leaks. All kinds of things can actually do that. That's the problem with those codes when you're check engine light comes on. They're relatively generic, and they can often have dozens of possible causes. J. Ark says, I'm going to change the radiator of my 2000 Nissan Xterra. The heater doesn't work now. I was informed when you try to bleed the system, you have to turn on the heat. Is there any other way to do it? There's a lot of reasons your heater may not work, right? You might just be low on coolant. But you want to get all the air out of the system. There are many other ways to do it. I'm a mechanic. I use a vacuum machine. It sucks all of the air out of the system. And then I just stick the tube on my machine into a gallon of antifreeze. And when I open the valve, by suction, it fills it up and there's no air. It works great. But what you can do is you can back out of a driveway so that the front's higher than the back, or you can jack the front end of the vehicle up in the air. When it's up in the air, when the front end is higher than the rear end, then the air will migrate out of the radiator cap best. So you can let it idle there with a fan in front of it, say, and just keep watching it. And as it gets air, the air will come to the highest point. Air will always go to the highest point. Add the coolant until it's full. Now, you might find when you're done, your heater works. And that's because there was air in the heater. If the heater still doesn't work, there's a lot of reasons. You got a bad blend door, all kinds of problems, clogged heater core, you name it. But jacking the car up in the air like that, with the radiator cap off, with a fan in front of it to keep it cool, will burp most of the air out of the top. As long as you jack it up pretty high. Jack the front up higher than the back, or if you're on a big hill, just park it back so that the front is at the high part of the hill and the back is at the low part of the hill, and then the air will naturally burp out of the radiator cap because it'll be the high point. They're making fuel cell semi-trucks. Now you might think this is something new, but it isn't. Hyundai's been doing these fuel cell trucks since 2020. In Switzerland, Germany, Israel, South Korea, and New Zealand. They've gone over 4 million miles so far. It's a logical thing. Hydrogen fuel cell 18-wheeled trucks, because they're commercial. The fuel cells, trucks, they can refuel in, 10, 15 minutes. They're not like you got to plug it in. You'd be waiting a long time to recharge a battery semi-truck, right? And they don't have the disadvantage of you need to pull more weight. You need a bigger battery. The bigger battery weighs more. Then that's got to be added up, and then that weighs more, and it's got to pull more weight. The hydrogen fuel cell system is there. It has a weight. And then you just add the tanks of hydrogen, which are nowhere near as heavy as the giant batteries. Plus, you don't have to worry about the precious metals. You don't need them. You don't have the giant batteries in them, right? Now, Hyundai says they have 450 miles of range, pulling 82,000 pounds. I'd want to see it myself to see if it actually did. Right? But the thing is, even if they only had 350 miles of range, as long as every 350 miles had a hydrogen refueling station for these commercial trucks, they'd be able to go on and on and on. It's not like you got an electric truck. It goes 350 miles, then it's got to be recharged. It's going to take a really long time. No, you just add the hydrogen. And it makes sense to start it this way with commercial trucks where they can have commercial fueling stations and then work for them. Don't make this fantasy like electric battery cars. Oh, we're all going to be driving them soon. Yeah. Where's the electricity coming from? There isn't any, right? Well, in this case, set up a hydrogen infrastructure for commercial trucks and work on it from there. Realize all this stuff's going to take a long time. This fantasy, these morons in Washington, a couple of years, we're going to all be... No, it takes forever to build this stuff. It takes forever to get an infrastructure up and running. And with new technology, they have to perfect it too. So they seem to be doing a pretty good job with these hydrogen fuel cell, big ones for trucks. Start it up. See how it works for big trucks, and then maybe later be using it for regular cars you're driving around. Because that infrastructure would have to be gigantic. It would cost a fortune, right? So, start with the big ones. The opposite of battery electric cars. They should have started battery electric cars small and worked their way up. Well, in this sense, it makes more sense to hydrogen fuel cells to start big and then work their way down. Now, here's a hilarious one from Henry, Texas. Scotty, it's so true about rich people and luxury cars. I watch these young guys with supercars. They act like they have so much money, and they spend it with no end. There's a guy who's building a $2 million house down the road from me. Every time he needs an oil change in his McLaren, he has a transport that takes it all the way from Salt Lake City to San Diego. No wonder our nation is in debt and it's near monetary collapse with these kind of attitudes. I agree entirely. Well, that's the funniest one I ever heard. Guy's living in Salt Lake and he has this fancy British sports car shipped to San Diego to get the oil changed and stuff, and then shipped back. Need I say more? Yes, I do feel sorry for the young generation. Who knows what's happening to our society, that these things are done, that people waste money in such frivolous things as that. It makes no sense to me. What are they trying to prove? I drive a McLaren. Now, originally there were sports cars, right? And ultra-rich drivers. I mean, it still is an ultra-rich car, right? Couldn't we do better things with our money than waste it on stuff like that? Ship your car all that way for an oil change? Yes, I guess our society is in decline. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.